The bustling streets of New York City seemed indifferent to everyone who walked them. Amidst the cacophony of honking horns, chattering pedestrians, and the occasional rumble of a subway below, there was one man who moved like a ghost. Victor Grayson, a millionaire with a fortune built on ruthless corporate takeovers, was a shadow of the lively man he had once been. At 57, he had all the wealth one could imagine: luxurious cars, sprawling estates, and an enviable art collection. But none of it mattered anymore. Victor wasn't always this way. Once upon a time, he was a young entrepreneur with a fire in his belly, a twinkle in his eye, and a deep, resonating laugh that echoed through boardrooms. But time had stripped him of his joy, and success had robbed him of something even more precious: human connection. After losing his wife in a tragic car accident 12 years earlier, he had gradually withdrawn into himself. His mansion on the Upper East Side was a gilded prison, filled with everything he could buy, but devoid of anyone who cared. On this particular Tuesday evening, Victor strolled aimlessly through Washington Square Park, his designer trench coat shielding him from the autumn chill. The park was alive with artists, skateboarders, and musicians vying for attention. Victor moved past them, as invisible to the crowd as they were to him. But then, a melody caught his ear, something haunting yet strangely uplifting. He turned toward the sound and saw a young man sitting on a worn folding chair. The musician's guitar had seen better days, its wood scratched and its strings visibly frayed. Yet, in his hands, it sang with a raw, unpolished beauty. The musician himself was a contradiction. Messy brown hair framed a face that seemed far older than his years, and his jacket had patches stitched with care. A sign rested at his feet: "Anything helps. Thank you." Victor stood transfixed as the young man played. The notes weren't perfect, and the rhythm stumbled occasionally, but there was something about it, a kind of honesty that cut through the noise of the world. When the music stopped, the young man looked up. His brown eyes locked onto Victor's, and he gave a small, tired smile. "Like the show?" the musician asked, his voice raspy but warm. Victor hesitated, unsure how to respond. He wasn't used to casual conversation. Finally, he nodded. "Yes, it was unexpected." The musician chuckled softly. "Unexpected, huh? I'll take it. Name's Jesse, by the way." Victor's lips twitched as if they were trying to form a smile. "Victor." "Well, Victor," Jesse said, gesturing to the nearly empty guitar case at his feet. "Got any requests? I'm taking tips in the form of spare change, profound advice, or sandwiches." The joke was disarming. Against his better judgment, Victor pulled a $100 bill from his wallet and dropped it into the case. Jesse's eyes widened. "Man, I was kidding about the sandwiches," he said, laughing. "This is... wow." "Thank you." Victor shrugged, already regretting the gesture. He wasn't sure why he had done it. Something about Jesse's unguarded smile unsettled him. It was too genuine, too raw. Victor wasn't ready for that kind of honesty. With a curt nod, he turned and walked away, the sound of Jesse's voice trailing after him. "Hey, Victor, thanks for listening. Come back sometime." Victor didn't answer, but as he made his way back to his cold, empty mansion, he realized something strange. For the first time in years, he didn't feel entirely alone. Victor couldn't explain why the memory of the street musician lingered in his mind. For days, Jesse's music played in a loop inside his head, like a melody he couldn't shake off. It wasn't just the music, it was Jesse himself. The way he smiled, his casual humor, and the light in his eyes despite his worn-out circumstances. Victor had spent years surrounded by people who faked smiles, yet here was someone who seemed to mean every word he said. On a crisp Saturday afternoon, Victor found himself back in Washington Square Park. He told himself it was a coincidence, that he was merely enjoying the fresh air. But deep down, he knew better. As he approached the park's fountain, he heard it again. That same guitar, that same raw, soulful sound. Jesse was in his usual spot, head bent over his guitar, playing as if the world around him didn't exist. Victor stood at a distance, watching. Today, the crowd around Jesse was larger, but the young man seemed oblivious to their stares. His music had a magnetism, drawing people in without effort. Victor felt something stir within him, a strange combination of envy and admiration. When Jesse finished his song, the small crowd clapped politely before dispersing. Victor hesitated, then stepped forward. "Back for an encore?" Jesse asked, grinning as he recognized Victor. "I didn't think millionaires made a habit of slumming it in the park." Victor stiffened, unsure whether Jesse was teasing or mocking him. "What makes you think I'm a millionaire?" Jesse shrugged, his smile widening. "The coat, the watch, the shoes. Take your pick. You're either loaded or moonlighting as a fashion model." Victor chuckled, caught off guard by Jesse's easy charm. "I suppose I should take that as a compliment." "You should," Jesse said. "So what brings you back? Don't tell me I'm your new favorite artist." Victor shifted uncomfortably. "Let's just say I had some free time." Jesse studied him for a moment, then nodded as if he understood something Victor didn't. "Well, since you're here, have a seat." Victor hesitated, then lowered himself onto the bench next to Jesse. For a moment they sat in silence, the city's noise filling the space between them. Then Jesse picked up his guitar and began strumming softly. "Do you play?" Jesse asked, glancing at Victor. Victor shook his head. "Number I never had the patience for it." "Shame," Jesse said, his fingers dancing over the strings. "Music's good for the soul, cheaper than therapy too." Victor smiled faintly. "And yet here you are, playing for spare change." Jesse laughed, the sound surprisingly rich and carefree. "Touché. But hey, everyone's got their hustle. Some people trade stocks, I trade melodies." Victor didn't reply. He was too busy studying Jesse, his calloused hands, the way his body swayed slightly with the music, the spark in his eyes that seemed to defy the weight of his struggles. For reasons he couldn't quite articulate, Victor felt drawn to this young man. He wanted to know more about him, about the life that had shaped him into someone who could still smile despite the odds. "What's your story, Jesse?" Victor asked suddenly. Jesse stopped playing and leaned back, his expression unreadable. "That's a loaded question." "I've got time," Victor said quietly. Jesse studied him again, then sighed. "All right, Mr. Millionaire, but it's not exactly a fairy tale." And with that, Jesse began to talk. Jesse leaned back on the bench, resting his guitar against his knee. He gazed out at the park, as if searching for the right words in the autumn breeze. "I grew up in a small town, nothing like this place," Jesse began, his tone light, though his eyes held a shadow. "Mom worked 2 jobs. Dad was, well, let's just say he wasn't around much. Music was my escape, an old guitar my uncle gave me when I was 10. It was beat up, missing a string, but it was mine." Victor listened in silence, his sharp mind absorbing every detail. He could sense there was more to the story, something Jesse wasn't saying outright. "I taught myself to play by watching videos at the library," Jesse continued. "We didn't have internet at home, so I'd sneak off after school and spend hours there. By the time I was 16, I could play pretty much anything by ear. I thought maybe music would be my ticket out, you know?" Victor nodded, recognizing the spark of youthful ambition in Jesse's voice. "What happened?" Jesse's smile faltered, replaced by a weary expression. "Life happened. Mom got sick. Cancer. I dropped out of high school to take care of her. The bills piled up faster than I could keep track of. After she passed, I didn't have much left. No money, no family, just this guitar." For a moment, Jesse's voice broke, but he quickly regained his composure. "So, I packed up and came here. Figured if I was going to struggle, I might as well do it in a city that never sleeps. Been playing on these streets ever since." Victor felt a pang of guilt. His wealth could have solved every problem Jesse had faced, yet here he was, a silent witness to the young man's struggles. But what struck him most was Jesse's resilience. Despite everything, he had survived. "Do you ever think about giving up?" Victor asked quietly. Jesse shrugged. "Every day. But then I remember my mom. She never gave up on me, even when life gave her every reason to. So I keep playing. Some days people stop and listen. Other days I'm invisible. But as long as I've got this guitar, I'm still standing." Victor looked at Jesse, truly looked at him, and felt something shift inside. This young man, with his patched jacket and frayed strings, was the embodiment of strength. Victor realized he had spent years hiding from life, drowning in his own loneliness, while Jesse had faced his pain head-on and kept moving forward. "You're stronger than most people I know," Victor said softly. Jesse grinned, though his eyes glistened with unshed tears. "Thanks, but I'm just doing what I can to get by. Everyone's got their own battles, right?" Victor nodded, though he wasn't sure he agreed. For the first time in years, he felt a flicker of something he couldn't quite name. Hope, maybe, or purpose. He wasn't sure what it was, but he knew one thing. This wasn't the last time he would sit on this bench with Jesse. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the park in golden light, Victor stood to leave. "I'll see you again, Jesse." Jesse smiled. "I'll be here. Same time, same place." As Victor walked away, he felt lighter, as if the weight of his loneliness had begun to lift. He didn't yet know what he could do to help Jesse, but one thing was clear. He wanted to try. Victor returned to his mansion that evening, but for the first time in years, the silence felt unbearable. The high ceilings and pristine decor, once symbols of his success, now seemed cold and hollow. He found himself pacing his study, Jesse's story replaying in his mind like a haunting melody. Unable to sleep, Victor opened his laptop and began researching. He learned about the struggles of street musicians, their challenges, and the rare instances when their talent had been recognized. He stumbled across videos of unknown artists who became sensations because someone had believed in them. As he watched, a thought began to form, a daring, almost reckless idea. The next day, Victor returned to Washington Square Park, clutching a black case under his arm. Jesse was already there, his fingers plucking out a lively tune that cut through the city's noise. A few people had gathered around, nodding to the beat or dropping coins into his guitar case. Victor waited until Jesse finished, and the small crowd dispersed. When Jesse looked up and saw Victor, he grinned. "Back again, huh? Starting to think you might actually like my music." Victor smiled faintly. "Maybe I do. But today I brought you something." He handed the black case to Jesse, who looked at it with wide eyes. "What's this?" "Open it and see." Jesse set his guitar aside and unlatched the case. Inside was a gleaming acoustic guitar, its polished wood reflecting the sunlight. It was a top-of-the-line instrument, the kind Jesse could only dream of owning. "Are you serious?" Jesse asked, his voice trembling. "This must have cost a fortune." Victor shrugged. "Consider it an investment. Your old guitar has served you well, but I think you deserve better." Jesse ran his fingers over the strings, his expression a mixture of awe and disbelief. I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," Victor said. "Just play." Jesse picked up the guitar and strummed a chord. The sound was rich and resonant, filling the air with a clarity his old guitar could never achieve. He looked up at Victor, his face breaking into a genuine smile. "This is amazing," Jesse said. "Thank you. Seriously? Thank you?" Victor nodded, feeling an unfamiliar warmth in his chest. "You've got talent, Jesse. Real talent. I think it's time the world heard it." Jesse laughed, though his eyes glistened with emotion. "You sound like you're about to be my manager." "Maybe I am," Victor said, only half joking. For the next hour, Jesse played with a renewed energy, the new guitar inspiring him to try bolder melodies and more intricate chords. People stopped to listen, some filming with their phones, others clapping enthusiastically. For the first time, Jesse wasn't just a street musician. He was a performer, commanding attention and admiration. As the sun began to set, Jesse looked at Victor. "You didn't have to do this, you know." Victor shrugged. "Maybe I didn't, but I wanted to." Jesse smiled, his gratitude evident. "Well, I won't let you down." Victor didn't respond immediately. He simply watched as Jesse packed up his new guitar, his heart lighter than it had been in years. For the first time, he felt like he was part of something meaningful, something that went beyond his wealth. As they parted ways, Victor couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of something extraordinary. The next time Victor visited Washington Square Park, he noticed something different. Jesse's usual spot was surrounded by a larger crowd than before. People clapped, swayed to the music, and even whistled in approval. Jesse, with his new guitar in hand, played with a confidence Victor hadn't seen before. His melodies were sharper, his rhythm bolder. He looked like a man transformed. Victor stood at the back of the crowd, quietly observing. He wasn't the type to bask in recognition, but seeing Jesse's growth brought an unexpected sense of pride. Jesse noticed him and gave a quick nod of acknowledgement before launching into another song, this one faster and more vibrant. The crowd loved it. After the set, Jesse packed up his guitar as people lingered, asking if he had an album or a way to follow his music. Jesse scratched his head sheepishly, muttering apologies and promising to figure something out. Victor stepped forward. "I see the crowd's getting bigger," Victor said with a hint of a smile. Jesse grinned. "Yeah, it's wild. Never thought I'd have fans." "You've got more than fans," Victor said, his tone serious. "You've got potential. It's time to take this further." Jesse tilted his head, intrigued. "What do you mean?" Victor gestured to the crowd that was slowly dispersing. "These people aren't just listening. They're connecting with your music. But you can't keep playing in the park forever. You need a stage, a real audience." Jesse laughed, but there was a nervous edge to it. "A stage? I'm just a guy with a guitar. What would I even do on a stage?" "You'd do exactly what you're doing now," Victor replied. "Play. The only difference is the audience would be bigger, and they'd be paying to hear you." Jesse hesitated, his hands tightening on the guitar case. "I don't know, Victor. That sounds huge. I'm not sure I'm ready for that." Victor placed a reassuring hand on Jesse's shoulder. "You've faced tougher things than this. Besides, you don't have to do it alone. I can help." Jesse looked at him, searching his face for any sign of insincerity. He found none. Finally, he nodded slowly. "All right, let's give it a shot. But where do we even start?" Victor's smile widened. "Leave that to me." The following week, Victor threw himself into the project with a focus and energy he hadn't felt in years. He contacted a small, intimate music venue he had connections with and secured Jesse a spot in their Friday night lineup. He also helped Jesse create a social media page and arranged for a friend to record a professional demo. Jesse, though nervous, went along with every step, trusting Victor's judgment. The night of the performance arrived faster than either of them expected. Jesse stood backstage at the venue, his hands trembling as he held his guitar. The faint hum of the audience beyond the curtain made his stomach churn. Victor approached, sensing Jesse's anxiety. "Nervous?" Jesse laughed nervously. "That obvious?" Victor nodded. "Good. It means you care." Jesse exhaled, trying to steady himself. "What if I mess up? What if no one likes it?" Victor placed a hand on his shoulder. "You've played through harder things, Jesse. This is just another park, only with better lighting." Jesse chuckled despite himself. "You're not bad at pep talks, you know that." "I've had practice," Victor said, stepping back. "Now go out there and show them what I saw in the park that day." As Jesse stepped onto the stage, the lights dimmed and the audience quieted. He adjusted the mic, his fingers brushing the strings of his guitar. For a moment he hesitated, the enormity of the moment pressing down on him. Then he closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and began to play. The first note rang out clear and true, silencing any lingering doubts. The room was captivated, drawn in by the raw emotion in Jesse's music. Victor watched from the back, a smile tugging at his lips. This was Jesse's moment, but in a small way, it felt like his victory too. The final note of Jesse's performance lingered in the air, followed by a brief, stunned silence. Then, like a wave crashing onto the shore, the applause began. It was thunderous, reverberating through the intimate venue and washing over Jesse like an unexpected embrace. Jesse blinked, his fingers still resting on the guitar strings. He looked out at the audience, their faces lit with admiration, and gave a sheepish smile. For the first time, he felt like more than just a street performer. He felt like an artist. Backstage, Victor waited, leaning casually against the wall, though his heart swelled with pride. When Jesse walked off the stage, Victor greeted him with a firm handshake and a wide smile. "You did it," Victor said, his voice filled with genuine warmth. Jesse laughed, shaking his head in disbelief. "I can't believe they actually liked it." Victor chuckled. "Of course they liked it. You've got something special, Jesse. This is just the beginning." In the days that followed, the impact of Jesse's performance rippled outward. Videos of his set, recorded by audience members, started circulating on social media, gaining traction faster than either of them had anticipated. Comments poured in, praising his raw talent and heartfelt lyrics. Local blogs picked up the story. From streets to stage, the rise of Jesse, the street musician. Victor found himself stepping into the role of an unofficial manager. He helped Jesse navigate the flood of messages, requests for interviews, and offers for gigs. Jesse, overwhelmed but excited, relied on Victor's calm and calculated guidance. One morning, over coffee at a small cafe, Jesse looked across the table at Victor. "Why are you doing all this for me?" Victor stirred his coffee thoughtfully before answering. "Because you remind me of something I've forgotten." Jesse raised an eyebrow. "What's that?" Victor smiled faintly. "That there's more to life than making money. You've shown me something I didn't even know I was missing. Purpose." Jesse tilted his head, studying Victor with curiosity. "You know, for a guy who seems to have everything, you don't talk much about yourself. What's your story, Victor?" Victor hesitated. He wasn't used to opening up, but something about Jesse's earnestness made it easier. "I wasn't always a millionaire," he began. "I grew up in a working-class family. My father ran a small hardware store, and my mother worked as a teacher. They were good people, but they always struggled to make ends meet." He paused, his eyes distant. "I worked my way up, built my fortune piece by piece. But along the way, I lost something. My wife, Claire. She was my anchor, the one who reminded me to look up from my work and actually live. When I lost her, I threw myself into building walls around my life, thinking they'd protect me. All they did was isolate me." Jesse listened intently, his usual playful demeanor replaced by quiet empathy. "I'm sorry, Victor. That sounds heavy." Victor nodded. "It was. But meeting you, seeing your resilience, your passion, it's reminded me that life doesn't have to be about isolation. You've given me a reason to step out of the shadows." Jesse leaned back, a small smile playing on his lips. "Well, guess we've both helped each other then." Victor laughed softly. "I suppose we have." As weeks turned into months, Jesse's journey continued to unfold. He booked more gigs, collaborated with local musicians, and even started recording his first album. With Victor's help, he began to build a following, his music touching lives far beyond the streets of New York. But their bond wasn't just about music. It became a friendship, a partnership built on mutual respect and understanding. Victor, once a lonely millionaire hidden behind walls of wealth, found himself rediscovering joy through Jesse's unyielding spirit. And Jesse, the struggling street musician, found more than a stage. He found a family, a mentor, and a reminder that even in the darkest times, light could break through. Jesse's rise in the local music scene was nothing short of meteoric. The once struggling street musician now found himself performing at packed venues, his songs echoing through spaces far larger than the park where it all began. His music resonated deeply with audiences, each note telling a story of resilience, hope, and the beauty of human connection. Victor watched from the sidelines, a quiet but essential presence in Jesse's journey. It wasn't just about business for him anymore. It was personal. Jesse's success felt like a shared victory, a testament to the power of taking a chance on someone when the world had turned its back. One evening, after a particularly electrifying performance at a local theater, Jesse and Victor sat backstage. The room was filled with the buzz of excitement as crew members and fans lingered outside, eager to meet the man whose music had touched their hearts. "You ever think we'd get this far?" Jesse asked, a towel draped around his neck as he sipped water. Victor chuckled. "Not at first, but the more I listened to you, the more I believed it was possible." Jesse set down his bottle, a serious look crossing his face. "I couldn't have done any of this without you, Victor. You gave me a chance when no one else would." Victor shook his head. "All I did was see what was already there. The rest was you." Jesse smiled, his eyes glistening. "Still, I owe you, and I want to do something to show it." Victor raised an eyebrow. "What are you planning?" A week later, Victor received a mysterious invitation to an event at a community center in one of the city's less affluent neighborhoods. When he arrived, he found a small crowd gathered in a modest but welcoming space. Jesse greeted him at the door, practically bouncing with excitement. "What's all this?" Victor asked, looking around. Jesse grinned. "You'll see." As the event began, Jesse took to the stage, addressing the crowd with his usual charm. "Hey everyone, thanks for coming. Tonight's not about me, it's about giving back." He gestured to a banner that hung behind him. "The Grayson Foundation for Street Artists." Victor's breath caught. "Jesse, what is this?" Jesse stepped down from the stage and stood beside him. "It's a fund I started, named after you. It's going to help other street musicians get the support they need, new instruments, recording opportunities, even small grants to help them chase their dreams." Victor stared at him, speechless. "You gave me a chance, Victor," Jesse continued, his voice thick with emotion. "Now it's my turn to pay it forward, and I couldn't think of a better name for it than yours." Victor felt a lump rise in his throat. For years, he had believed his wealth was meaningless without someone to share it with. Now, he saw it being used to create something far greater than himself. The crowd cheered as the first recipients of the fund were announced. 3 young street musicians, each given a grant and mentorship to help them take the next step in their musical journeys. Jesse played a song dedicated to them, and Victor, standing in the audience, felt something he hadn't felt in years: profound gratitude. Later that evening, as the crowd dispersed, Jesse and Victor stood outside the center, gazing up at the stars. "You've done something incredible here, Jesse," Victor said, his voice quiet but firm. Jesse shrugged, a modest smile on his face. "I just followed your lead." Victor shook his head. "No, you did more than that. You turned my second chance into a miracle." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The city hummed around them, alive with possibility. "Think this is the end of the story?" Jesse asked, glancing at Victor. Victor smiled, a warmth spreading through him. "No, Jesse, this is just the beginning." Months passed, and the Grayson Foundation for Street Artists grew beyond anything Victor or Jesse had imagined. Musicians from across the city began applying, sharing their stories of hardship and hope. Each grant given, each instrument donated, became a stepping stone for someone to find their voice in a world that often silenced them. Victor found himself immersed in the foundation's work. He attended events, met artists, and even took the stage on rare occasions to speak about the importance of believing in people. The man who once hid behind the walls of his mansion was now a mentor, a benefactor, and, most surprisingly, a friend to countless aspiring artists. One evening, Victor and Jesse sat in the quiet of Victor's mansion, a place that no longer felt as empty as it once had. The house was now filled with life. Art pieces donated by grateful musicians, recordings of Jesse's performances, and even a small studio where street artists could come and practice. "This place feels different," Jesse remarked, looking around. Victor smiled, pouring 2 glasses of wine. "It is, thanks to you." Jesse laughed. "I didn't do anything to your house." "You did more than you know," Victor said, handing him a glass. "You reminded me what it means to connect with people. For years I was living, but I wasn't alive. Meeting you, it changed everything." Jesse looked at him, his expression serious. "You know, I don't think I'd be here without you. But it's not just about the guitar or the gigs. It's about what you saw in me when I couldn't even see it myself." Victor raised his glass. "To second chances." Jesse clinked his glass with Victor's. "And to creating them for others." The following weekend, the foundation hosted its largest event yet, a street music festival that brought together performers from all walks of life. The city's parks and squares buzzed with energy as musicians filled the air with melodies of hope and resilience. Jesse was the headliner, of course. When he took the stage, the crowd erupted in cheers, their admiration tangible. He began with a song he had written just for the occasion, a tribute to every struggling artist who had ever dared to dream. As his voice rose above the strum of his guitar, Victor watched from the front row, his heart swelling with pride. Halfway through the set, Jesse paused. "Before I play the next song, I want to thank someone who made all of this possible." The spotlight shifted to Victor, and the crowd turned to him, clapping and cheering. Victor, unaccustomed to the attention, stood awkwardly, giving a small wave. "This guy right here," Jesse continued, "he's proof that it's never too late to make a difference, not just in your own life, but in someone else's. So, this one's for you, Victor." Jesse launched into a song that told their story. The lonely millionaire and the street musician, 2 strangers brought together by chance, who created something far bigger than themselves. The lyrics were raw, heartfelt, and deeply moving. By the end, there wasn't a dry eye in the crowd. As the festival came to a close, Victor and Jesse stood together, watching the sun set over the city. The streets were alive with music, laughter, and the promise of new beginnings. "Think we've done enough?" Jesse asked, a playful smile on his face. Victor shook his head, his own smile full of quiet determination. "Not even close." Together they walked away, ready to face whatever came next. Because in their unlikely bond, they had found not only purpose, but also a reminder of what the world could be. A place where miracles were born from the simplest acts of kindness.